Thank you very much for your introduction. And I have to tell you, it is always a great honor and joy to be here because you feel totally inspired. And I just totally believe what I heard just recently, that all you need is love and compassion. So we can agree on that, I think, to start with. But if I talk about the art of culture diplomacy, I mean it, because we all can live our life as an art form. So if we are allowed to speak about the art of living, why can't we not establish a way how we do the culture diplomacy, which can be really related to different art forms? Because what is the basic for that? It is really listening, a real dialogue, inspiration, and use the diversity as a source of inspiration and not as a source of burden. I was brought up behind the Iron Curtain, as many of us were here in this room, and I remember coming from a class enemy background, not being a communist. The only hope for me that time was really international relations through culture. So in a way, I had the freedom in my mind really through culture diplomacy. And then after 1990, after the political changes, I was able to establish the Hungarian Culture Institute in London. And I remember actually to work bilaterally on the concept of really building a space where cultures, ideas, thoughts, people could meet and really build bridges and build a kind of understanding. And I also remember that for about 2 years, the British didn't believe that I was building a culture center. Because of course, during the Cold War, the culture centers used to play a role as information gathering, secret service gathering, and we all knew that. And then it took me really quite a while to prove that I was really sure and open and honest about that we can really build the bridges purely through building cultural bridges and establishing a kind of format of culture dialogue. But of course, what I'm going to speak now here is the perspective of an international institution, and this is UNESCO, because I'm a Hungarian, I'm a European, I'm a world citizen. And of course, working in UNESCO, especially as the president of the General Conference, you have to learn that in a way, you always have to find the messages which can be understood by now by 195 countries. And when we talk about cultural diplomacy, we really have to think globally, because whatever we do in our little surrounding, let it be our family or our country or our continent, it will affect the whole world. I'm a great believer of an African philosophy, and it's called Ubuntu. You know, normally I realized in the world that we, coming from the West, we give advices, we give experience, we talk about things, and we not listen enough. But we, for example, if we would, for example, listen to Ubuntu, to this African philosophy, we would forget a little bit about our egoism. And we would understand that really the value what makes a person, a society, is really the way as the person or the society or the group relates to the community, how the person can serve the community. And this is, I think, for me, after love and compassion, is a very important base for culture diplomacy. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is, of course, a great honor and privilege for me to be here and to talk in front of you about this kind of 2 years of experience and about the perspective of UNESCO. Because in the practice of international relations, it is common to look at the world as divided into developed and the developing, democratic and democratizing, rich and poor, north and south. and putting countries into distinct and simple categories serves as a conceptual tool for academicians and politicians alike. But it is also an obstacle our vision of the true diversity of humanity, and prevents us from understanding the shared values that make us one human family. I believe personally that culture diplomacy should stand above such political and ideological divisions, and UNESCO should stand above it as well. Because UNESCO represents the alliance of different cultures, languages, and religions, an idea of a peaceful world governed by the shared international norms and principles, and not by power politic. Let there be no doubt that we also wield power in this organization, but the power that derives from the equality among all member states under its roof, from the practice of international democracy that ensures the voice of the smallest and the poorest, from the commitment to the principle of consensual decision-making that has for decades exemplified the organization. Ours is the power to transform minds towards peaceful coexistence, and that's important in culture diplomacy. To inspire the global consciousness among all people. UNESCO stands for opening people's eyes and minds to the diversity and beauty of our planet and transcending cultural or national boundaries. I believe that everyone matters and matters equally. We are united in our belief that peace that is based on human solidarity, intercultural harmony, and the realization of our common destiny is more powerful than an ideology of division, hatred, or war. The imperative to realize this vision of positive peace through international cooperation has never been stronger nor more urgent than today. I am not naive. I know what's going on in the world, but never before have we been so interdependent through the social, economic, and technological systems of our own creation, and never have we been able to so profoundly disrupt these systems through our actions, including the ecosystems of the planet. It would be difficult to name a pressing social, economic, or environmental challenge today that doesn't call for a coordinated international cooperation to address it, often in the fields of UNESCO's mandate. This trend will only get stronger within time. These global challenges formed a backdrop in 2011 to the 36th session of the General Conference of UNESCO, which elected me as president. The challenges were compounded by the financial difficulties that arose after the decision of the General Conference to admit Palestine as the member state of UNESCO. And I remember when I announced this, the whole life around us has changed. This decision had far-reaching consequences for UNESCO due to existing domestic legislation in the United States that barred the country from paying membership dues to the international organization that grants Palestine a full membership. The loss of the statutory contribution from the biggest payer to its regular budget placed UNESCO in a difficult position of having to meet the expectations of doing more with less. I envisaged my presidency to be truly representative of all member states, and therefore, from the very beginning of my campaign, I directly asked my colleagues, the ambassadors, and the representatives of the countries about their vision and expectations of the role. And the answers I received, reflecting the priorities of the countries and their delegations, of course, were different. But what I took out of it was what the ambassador of India told me. Just be the heart and the soul of the organization. So I took my heart, the concerns voiced by the countries, endeavored to facilitate constructive exchanges among the member states and the various organs of UNESCO, and advocated tirelessly the mission and the vision, staying true to my conviction that we are personally responsible for putting substance into our jobs and making them meaningful. I decided to invest these 2 years with the task of assisting the organization in its difficult times to raise the global awareness about the importance of its mandate and its functions. Already in my acceptance speech in 2011, I spoke about the art of culture diplomacy, and I outlined the vision and aspiration. I really thought and think today that celebrating cultural diversity through intercultural exchanges and interface dialogue is the base for our work. This guides us towards preserving the diversity of cultural heritage, built or intangible, languages, and our surrounding, promoting gender equality and raising awareness of the role of women in conflict resolution is an important task at UNESCO. Exercising soft power for advancing peace, culture, scientific, and sports diplomacy are the major work for us in the House. But don't forget, we work outside. Paris is only the headquarters, but where the work is going on is on the field. And of course, I know that we, the representatives and the ambassadors of our countries, we are just temporary occupants of the House. But what we do there, representing our countries, will affect the global struggle for a peaceful tomorrow, long after our mandates. And I really hope that during our tenures, despite the mistakes made along the way, we have and we will set the right course of the organization. Mahatma Gandhi said that no culture can live if it attempts to be exclusive. I believe in a bridge, which is a bridge between the real and the ideal world. We need to have this ideal world, at least in our mind, and we have to be dreamers, but we have to be activists, and we have to be optimists for that. It was born out of reality as the humanity's response to the real horrors of war, based on the existing international paradigm of sovereign member states when UNESCO was born. But it was also born from the quest for ideals beyond national borders, ideals of the building lasting peace between all peoples of the world, rising above the heavy burden of violent past and using the creative energy of human diversity to reinforce our unity. These ideals predate UNESCO and can be found in all major religious and philosophical traditions of humanity. I take, of course, UNESCO as a crystal that breaks a single ray of light into a full spectrum of colors. Culture reflects our common experience as one human race into a plurality of languages, traditions, belief systems, and historical pathways. Just yesterday, we celebrated in UNESCO the Day of the Arabic Language. It is through the acknowledgement and respect for the diversity of words, cultures, that we as human beings come to understand and appreciate the core values and aspirations that make humanity one. And to respect Cultural diversity means to uphold the universal human rights, norms, and principles as the guiding framework for preserving the plurality of identities and ideas, and as a safeguard against the use of cultural diversity for policies and practices contrary to human rights and dignity. Traveling the world, I haven't found a country, I haven't found a culture which was not proud of itself. Traveling the world, I haven't found a country or a culture which didn't want to show itself to the world. But I didn't find enough experience to find the cultures and countries which really wanted to be interlinked with as many cultures and countries they could be. And this is what we have to work on together. And of course, we know all the notion of the culture of peace. And this is a constellation of ideas, principles, and values that guide our quest for a more peaceful world. Justice and democracy, human rights, non-discrimination, equality, tolerance and solidarity, rejection of violence, mutual respect and dialogue, just to name a few, represent powerful concepts that foster positive pattern of behavior and prevent conflicts by tackling the roots, causes, and channel human energy into nonviolent efforts of dialogue and negotiation. Within UNESCO, we have a very important program, and of course, it is related to gender equality. It was wonderful to hear the Prime Minister's speech about the importance of that. And I have to tell you, UNESCO was probably and is probably the only international organization which had a blessed time, where 3 women run the organization: the president of the General Conference, the chair of the executive board, and our director general. 3 women. And of course, our approach toward the problems in the world were a bit different. And I remember talking to very high-rank state dignitaries, prime ministers, presidents, kings, royalties, and they didn't believe that 3 women were discussing these very important problems. And then you still thought you have to work on that. I had the chance to work together with Betty Williams, this wonderful, wonderful lady from Northern Ireland, who was given the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977. And she said, peace is action and not words. So each country has its defining moral, each century has its defining moral issue, I believe. And if slavery was the towering moral issue in the 19th century, the fight against totalitarianism dominated the 20th century. The rights of women and the struggle to uphold them in every corner of the world will be the moral imperative of the 21st century, I believe. Beyond the imperative of keeping women and girls physically safe from harm, the international community faces the urgent need to empower women economically and politically. I remember when I went to Senegal, I found beautiful women, beautifully dressed up women, beautiful girls, old and young. And we have a program, for example, to help them to learn to read and write and to build competencies so that they could change their life. But not only their life, but the life of their families. And it is not related to whether you are rich or poor. It is related to compassion, understanding, and channeling the means to the right places in the world. To address the moral challenge, together with its international partners, UNESCO must maintain a standalone focus on gender equality. And I would like to say, when I talk about international partners, that this establishment, the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, is a wonderful one. I always think that the people, not only the speakers, but who come to listen and to learn, will bring their own ideas and their own energy and thoughts into this organization. And we need more and more organizations like that, who can work together with us. So I hope that this long-standing idea of working UNESCO together with this organization will become a reality in the very near future. We all know what Louis Pasteur said. He said, "Science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity, and it is the torch which illuminates the world." But we never quote, actually, the second part of the sentence of Pasteur, because he also said, of course, the scientists belong to one country. And that kind of dilemma is very much of the focal point today of science diplomacy. I've just come from Brazil, where we had the World Science Forum, where I chaired a very important panel of science diplomacy, where I invited scientists from Israel, Palestine, United States, Egypt, Africa, Ethiopia, Japan, and we discussed the role and the responsibility of the scientists of this century. Actually, the mechanism and the art of science diplomacy is very similar to culture diplomacy, and that is why I call both of them adding sports diplomacy to the so-called soft power, which I see in the program many of you have or will speak about. In a classical sense of term, of course, we know what soft power means. What we say in UNESCO about that is to build the defenses of peace in the minds of men and women. Our constitution declares, and this is the very essence of the organization, UNESCO represents a vision of the world where the only legitimate power is soft. And through this soft power, UNESCO helps people and societies to transform and to learn the culture of peace. With our thoughts, we make the world, teaches the Buddha. UNESCO is built on the belief that through our thoughts, we can transform ourselves and the world around us. But in isolation, no matter how powerful, the ideas within individual minds will not improve the lives of others. We must unite across the existing national, ethnic, and social boundaries to give our ideas a chance to cross-pollinate and spread for a truly global impact. My life has been dedicated to building bridges between peoples of the world using art, music, literature, and journalism as the medium of cross-cultural communication. Relying on my experiences and taking the opportunity of the multilateral platform of UNESCO, I have used my 2-year mandate as the President of the General Conference to promote the practice of culture diplomacy as the tool of spreading the culture of peace. Martin Luther King said, "Our lives begin to end the day when we become silent about things that matter." And the great Hungarian writer, Sándor Márai said, "You have to stand up when times call you." Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for the opportunity.